Welcome to Inside the Issues. I'm Amrit Singh. LA Mayor Karen Bass delivered her annual State of the City address tonight. It was her second one. The first one came just under 200 days into her administration. The speech is partly a way to highlight what Bass's office views as her accomplishments. Also, it's a pitch in part. The address comes just days before Bass's office releases a proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year. Costs were a theme of tonight's speech, as were many of the issues Bass ran on in 2022, including homelessness, crime, public safety. Mayor Karen Bass repeatedly addressed disrupting the status quo, amongst many other things. And we have someone great to speak to all about this speech and give you some context. Joining me now with analysis is Sara Sadhwani, Assistant Professor of Politics at Pomona College. Sara, thanks so much for being with us tonight. And you were there in the room, so let's just start by hearing what you heard and felt while being there.
Yeah, of course. You know, this is the mayor's second State of the City address. And so this means she's already well into her mayorship. You know, last year there was a lot of excitement and fanfare and celebration. But of course, about 18 months into her mayorship, we recognize that many of the issues that she ran on still have a lot of work to do. That being said, it was a full house in City Hall with many notable elected officials who were there cheering her on at times. We didn't hear any sort of boos or protests or anything of that sort. So this was a largely very friendly audience for a skilled politician, right? She came out and was very gracious towards all of her colleagues and maintained her message of unity. A State of the City, much like a State of the Union address, is an opportunity for a leader to really hone in on their accomplishments. And she did that coming out of the blocks, talking about the successes that she has had since she has been in office, before, of course, turning to the many, many challenges that the city still faces.
Yeah, there's a great recap, and you know, she talked about the tropical storm and the earthquake being on the same day. She talked about 10 freeway on fire, these huge challenges that her administration has faced and that she's responded to. And as you said, she did celebrate some things as well. Some of them, some people feel may not be worth celebrating because the numbers aren't really up to snuff, i.e. homelessness and Inside Safe, and we'll talk about that in a second. But let's just begin by talking about what I felt was a really effective moment in the speech. It was her proposal for what could be available for small business owners on the back of the Olympics and what the Olympics really can mean for Los Angeles. Let's take a listen to it, and then we'll have you respond on the other side. Okay, we're going to have that for you in a minute, Sara. But, you know, just give us a sense, when you heard her talk about the Olympics, what was your sense of what she said and how she talked about the messaging opportunity that it presented for LA?
Yeah, this actually came as a surprise. She talked about the billions of media hits that we're going to get for Los Angeles, the clicks that we're going to have, and really the media sensation and the attention that it's going to bring to the city of Los Angeles. And this, of course, comes right off the heels of the mayor, as well as a contingent of city council members, going to Paris to learn about how Paris had prepared for the Olympics when they were hosted there, and learning about the kind of infrastructure that will be needed. And she really queued up the need for all hands on deck, that we're going to have to look to a new Los Angeles by the time that we get to the time period of the Olympics. And before that, we also even have the World Cup coming in 2026. So there's a lot on the horizon for Los Angeles. And as you noted, the work is great and immense, right? We continue to face significant issues around homelessness, public safety, and crime. And these are issues that absolutely have to be addressed prior to, as she said, millions of people coming here to the city of Los Angeles to visit, and what kind of city it is that they're going to see when they come here.
I felt like it was very practical and pragmatic. You know, this is a big PR moment for LA, and she's talked a lot about the Olympics being an accelerator for a lot of her initiatives, and really for a lot of people viewed it as a moment of reckoning. I want to play for the people at home now because we do have that bit of sound, so let's take a listen to it, and then we'll talk some more.
My administration will create a focused initiative to make sure that the Games will mean hundreds of small businesses winning contracts and hiring Angelenos. But the lasting 21st century impact of these Games are the billions of media impressions, streaming minutes, and clicks. And those will cause billions of new and lasting opinions about LA. Opinions that will either reflect a land of opportunity and beauty where people should visit and invest, or a city that at best is just getting by on its past glory.
So, Sarah, one of the things that you mentioned about the Olympics is that the mayor, along with the delegation from City Council and other stakeholders from the city, went to Paris to learn from them what they could. And one of the things that Paris doesn't have as big of an issue with as we do here is homelessness. Homelessness is a big part of the speech. How do you feel like she did in terms of talking and framing the issue? One of the things she talked about was it's really an issue that we can talk about in phases, a rescue and recovery phase. I thought that was really effective, the way she kind of broke it out.
I think that's right. And what we see here is a maturity, if you will, of the mayor's approach to homelessness. Of course, you might recall when she first came into office, it was a state of emergency and all hands on deck. We're going to address this situation. 18 months in, we know that the situation continues to loom large throughout the city, despite the many efforts of her Inside Safe program. So I think this is the right kind of approach to continue to show the type of nuance that is needed, that there's not a one-size-fits-all response to homelessness, and a real acknowledgement from Bass that this is absolutely the #1 issue that is impacting her. And I have to give her a lot of credit for taking it on. It is certainly something that a leader could try to shove under the rug to some extent, but here she's really honing in on the kinds of responses that will be needed, and the difficulties in actually addressing them. The differences, for example, between short-term housing and long-term housing, thinking about people who are at risk of falling into homelessness as well, and the concerns about affordability for city workers. So she's really taking a holistic approach in this speech.
Yeah, as I say, there was aspects of the framing that were effective, but she's got to hope that it's effective because some of the numbers around it, she's drawn a lot of criticism for, and we should talk about that, right? I mean, at the end of last year, according to LA Times reporting, something like $60 million plus spent on Inside Safe for 255 people in permanent housing. Those numbers have gone up probably in both directions since that reporting came out. But it is a difficult moment for her in that sense. I want to play for the people at home a bit about the way she framed it in terms of rescue and recovery phases, and then we'll talk a bit more on the other side.
Inside Safe and our overall approach is evolving, and it'll continue to evolve. After the rescue phase comes the recovery phase. Lessons learned during the rescue phase can be applied, and we can think and plan for the longer term. The emergency doesn't end, it just enters a different phase.
So that's one way for people at home to wrap their minds around what feels like just an intractable problem with so much fatigue around spending. And if we talk about spending, let's just talk about what we heard when it comes to this budget shortfall and some of the proposals for making that gap up. In part, it was this idea of cutting the unfilled positions. Do you think she did an effective job selling that to LA?
Yeah, she has continuously said that there are a number of positions that have been unfilled, that have gone vacant for quite some time, and that at this point in time, she's not going to continue with those positions. Those are the positions that are going to be cut. And she took this head on, really saying, look, we need to have a full-scale analysis of all of our city departments, because perhaps we're trying to hire in these positions that aren't necessary, or there aren't people that actually fit the bill. So as a part of her speech around the vacancies, she also talked about her office starting a full analysis of all of the city departments as soon as this budget is done, in order to prepare for the next year. That perhaps there are jobs that we're posting for that really aren't necessary at this point in time, and I think that's a fair kind of approach to take. We have this deficit. We have to make cuts somewhere. So cutting some of these vacancies seems to be a reasonable option at this point in time. I think she sold it quite well.
Yeah, and she talked a lot about how she made an open call when she first took office for people, hey, come on down, work for LA. And that 3,500 some odd people wound up getting jobs that way, but that so many of these positions were still unfilled. And when we had Matt Szabo on here, he was saying, look, I mean, people aren't going to feel the pinch of these services that they're not even receiving. But people like Kenneth Mejia have been critical, right? And they've said the state is in a state of despair, and this is a desperate solution. And it was interesting. Mejia loomed over a couple of moments of this speech. We're going to pause for a quick break, Sarah. And when we come back, let's have this conversation about city controller and the auditing and some of the subtext around what we heard there from Mayor Karen Bass and Kenneth Mejia. We'll do that with Sara Sadhwani right after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside the Issues. We're talking about LA Mayor Karen Bass's second annual State of the City address. It comes against the backdrop of some difficult issues she was facing, including homelessness and a budget shortfall, $400 to $500 million shortfall with $288 million overspend. It was an opportunity for LA Mayor Karen Bass to discuss that a little bit, and here's the way she framed it for those of us that were watching.
It's no secret we're entering a tough budget year. It's not just us, though. Other cities are confronting rising costs and lower revenues, and Sacramento is anticipating major cuts. We can make real change with good policy and good smart policy, but carrying thousands of vacant positions on the books simply because they were there the year before, I want to end that.
Let's bring back in Professor Sara Sadhwani, who was in the room for the State of the City and has been recapping it with us. Sarah, it was an interesting way of reminding the people at home and giving some context to this LA City budget shortfall by talking about it in terms of other big cities and also what they're experiencing up in Sacramento.
Yeah, that's right. LA is not alone in facing a budget shortfall at this point in time. The state of California, of course, is also facing a significant budget deficit, and legislators are also looking to figure out how to account for that. A big portion of that is unexpected lower revenue coming in. And anytime we have this kind of deficit and shortfall, we have to look at ways of cutting. Now, there's plenty of division in terms of how to do that, what kinds of policies we should be advancing among city council members. But Mayor Bass was very clear in her speech tonight that that's going to come from some of these vacancies. It is most certainly not going to come from the Los Angeles Police Department budget. She made that very clear that she is moving forward to continue hiring at LAPD, but many of these other vacancies, these 2,000 or so vacancies in other city departments, that these are places that can be cut because these aren't services that aren't being administered. These are services that are already going undone. We don't necessarily even know what some of these positions might be. Of course, this has caused a lot of vitriol with the city controller, who very recently has been sending out tweets with siren emojis and really kind of taking a stab at Mayor Bass regarding the ending of these vacancies in order to close this budget shortfall. In part, perhaps some of that has to do with some of the hiring that could have been done in his own department, which is perhaps why he has thought so hard about this issue.
Yeah, Sarah, nobody's really cloaking themselves in glory when it comes to this budget shortfall, be it in Sacramento or other cities, but at least the mayor was taking her chance to educate the people and put it in context. And one of the proposals, as you mentioned, is that we heard from Mayor Bass about the budget is that she remains committed to LAPD recruiting, staffing, hiring. That includes these wages that she negotiated raises for. She also talked about climate change and how she would have a climate cabinet. So we heard some really specific items from her. But as you talk about Kenneth Mejia, it was interesting. I mean, the first time she mentioned him, the only time she mentioned him by name, it was very gracious. There was a conversation about how, hey, Kenneth Mejia, the city controller, has let us know, for instance, that city employees can't afford to live in LA. 2/3 of those employees can't afford to live in LA. It was very positive. But when you and I were talking in the break, you said there was an interesting sort of subtweet moment with her and Mejia, too.
Yeah, towards the end of her speech, she really kind of gives it to him, talking about how we need real policy, not Twitter wars. And of course, Mejia in just recent weeks has been certainly on a Twitter war rampage, specifically kind of poking at Mayor Bass for this deficit, saying, I've warned you and you didn't listen. You were supposed to cut the LAPD budget, because of course, Mejia comes from that school of thought, that further left contingent of Los Angeles politics associated with the Democratic Socialists of America, who want to defund the police and really adjust the budget the budget priorities in the city. Of course, Mayor Bass has long since she ran citywide said, no, that is not what we are doing. That is not the path forward for Angelenos. And so we see a real tete-a-tete on this one.
Yeah, public safety, a huge issue, as LAPD has come up a couple of times in our conversation tonight, Sarah, because so much of it is related to the budget and what we're seeing from a staffing standpoint. But of course, there's a conversation around crime rates. There was things to celebrate for Mayor Bass, and of course, things that she was sober-eyed about. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
We have focused on change and strategic investments, and as a result, violent crime and homicides were down in 2023. But we all know that these cycles can reverse, so the search for the next LAPD chief is critical. And this isn't the closed-door conversation. I've been meeting with officers, business organizations, community leaders, community members to ask them directly what they want to see in the next chief.
And she didn't exactly tell us what that was, but she did say that she was talking to other departments. And I think that's a good place for us in our final moments just to get a sense of the tone of the mayor. I mean, a lot of it was this arm-in-arm approach. We heard from City Council President Paul Krikorian before, and Supervisor Lindsay Horvath, also the chair there, the Board of Supervisors. And they were all spoken glowing terms. So in our final moment, just talk about what we're seeing there in terms of interinstitutional cooperation there in Los Angeles government.
You're right. Certainly the message is one of unity and alignment. We heard those terms used quite a lot this evening, and of course her signature terms, locking arms. And yet, particularly on the issue of public safety and crime, this is perhaps the area with the most division. Just last week, Councilmember Tracy Park doing a press event after 2 women were violently attacked in Venice, really calling for the mayor and to step up and push for more public safety and to really end this conversation about even trying to defund the police, talking about ending this quote unquote social experiment that we have been having. So most certainly this is an issue. The public safety issue is a top concern. Yes, while homicide and violent crime is down, that's not necessarily the feeling of people on the streets. People regularly report that crime and safety is one of the top issues in the city, that they don't feel safe walking down the streets. And of course, this is all sensationalized in many ways through some of the horrific video of the footage that we've had over the last several months of smash and grab robberies that have occurred in businesses and neighborhoods. So this is an ongoing issue, and certainly it's one where we see this level of cooperation, and yet at the same time, we know that there's not complete unity in terms of how to respond to these issues.
These moments of cooperation are so important, clearly, to Mayor Bass, to show that everyone is getting along. She talked about at the top of her speech, the Olympics are an opportunity to tell the world we are not as dysfunctional as you think we are. So to see those moments, Sarah, obviously shows some sense of an awareness that it's important for LA to be viewed as being together on this. But of course, the people at home just want to make sure the problems are getting better. So we have to hope that that's going to be what we see. And we know that we'll be having you on more to talk about those issues here in Southern California. I want to thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. For more stories in your communities, click the subscribe button right here. You can also download our app or watch us on TV for the latest information, balanced coverage, weather updates every 10 minutes, and more. We'll see you then.